Hello, and welcome to the first Lompoc High School Business Club podcast for the 2022-2023 school year. We are excited to be back from our hiatus. The Lompoc Business Club's podcasts are aimed to bring local businesses and citizens together. I'm Iwa Lani Martinson, a junior from the Lompoc High School Business Club, and this is my fellow peer, Michelle.
Hello, I'm Michelle Koga, a senior of the Lompoc High School Business Club.
Today, we are lucky to have school board member, Mr. Caldeira, with us. He is not only a member of the LUSD school board, but also a practicing certified public accountant. He is here today to enlighten us on the career path he took into becoming a certified public accountant or a CPA.
So before we start with the questions, we just like to ask, how are you doing today, Mr. Caldeira?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk to you both. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. I just got out of swim practice, so pretty pumped.
Sweet.
Same here. It was a bit of a rush getting here, but we're here now.
Awesome. Cool.
Okay, so first question, what drove you to pick accounting as your vocation and become a CPA?
Yeah, it was kind of a journey. When I was in high school, I was really into science and math. And so I actually went to college to become a biomedical engineer and did that for 2 years in college. And then I decided that I didn't want to be in a lab all day, like locked up in a lab doing experiments. So I took a leap and I changed my major to management. It was like the most general thing I could. And I like business. So went down that, and then that first semester after I switched, I got into an accounting class, found out that I really liked accounting, and I was actually very good at it. And that kind of set me on my path towards the CPA.
What college did you attend?
UC Merced for my undergrad, and then I have a master's degree from University of Massachusetts Global.
Oh, nice. Okay. What steps did you take in college to become an accountant? And did you have a dual major of accounting and finance?
I'm very odd, but I actually don't have my majors in management. It's not even in accounting. My college only had 2 accounting classes when I went there. UC Merced is a relatively new school, so it was still trying to figure itself out when I was there. So I took all those classes, and then I actually had to, after I graduated from undergrad, I had to take a break a little bit before I started my career to actually get enough units to sit for the CPA exam, because my college didn't offer enough. So I actually took 6 months to go to community colleges to get all the credits that I needed to do that.
When you were at UC Merced, did they offer any like accounting clubs or associations in college for you?
Sadly, they did not. There was a couple of us geek accountants who kind of hung out with our professor at lunch and stuff, and he's the one who kind of set us on our paths and kind of guided us through. And I think now there are accounting clubs, but like I said, it was a relatively new school, and UC Merced is more of a science engineering school. It's not really a business school. So yeah.
Okay, so what steps did you take to receive an interview at a Big Four firm? Like, did they come to your college for interviews, or did you have to apply for the job?
Yeah, they actually, one of the Big Four, PwC, wanted to come out to UC Merced to interview some candidates. That's how I got my name thrown in the bucket. They talked directly to our career group, and who worked with our accounting professor, who basically identified the key students that he thought would be a good fit, and gave our names to PwC for that interview. And yeah, they actually ended up not coming, but they reached out to me and was like, hey, we weren't able to make it. There's some scheduling conflict. And then I applied directly with them. They sent me a link to apply through them.
So after college and while working for PwC, what steps did you take to get certified as a public accountant? For example, we know that there's like a 4-part exam that you need to pass. And how many audit hours did you need to become a CPA?
Yeah, it was quite intense. I have some friends who are lawyers and have taken the bar exam, and they say that getting your CPA license is probably harder because there's 4 of them, 4 tests, and you have to pass them in a certain amount of time. So the basic requirements are you need 150 semester units in higher education. 24 of those units have to be in accounting, and 24 of those units have to be in business. A typical undergraduate degree is not 150 units. So most CPAs go straight from undergrad to graduate school, and then get their master's in accountancy, which will prep them for sitting for the exam. There's whole programs at all the universities set up to set you up to sit for the exam. I did not go down that path. I kind of went rogue, and went because I got an offer from PwC halfway through my senior year. So I already had a job lined up. And so I couldn't take time off to go get my master's at that point. So that's why I took that 6-month hiatus to get the 150 units that I needed. And then there is the 4 exams, which you mentioned. So the first, or no order really, but there's BEC, which is the Business Environment and Concepts exam. That one has to do with just high-level concepts on how business is run. There's some HR stuff in there. There is AUD, which is the auditing and attestation, which is all about how you audit financial statements, the different rules that you have to go through, how to write like an engagement letter, which is the letter you enter into with your clients, how to write an audit opinion, what those mean. There's that one. There's FIN, which is the Financial Accounting and Reporting exam, which is numbers. That's the numbers one. You crunch a whole bunch of numbers in different ways, and they basically test you to make sure you know all the accounting concepts. And then there's REG, which is the regulation one, which I basically say is just taxes. It's all the tax stuff, IRS, how to file various tax things. So, and then there are other requirements you have to have. You have to work under a licensed CPA for a year in order to get your CPA exam after you pass all your tests. And I forgot to mention, you have 18 months to pass all 4 of those tests. I actually, and the timer starts when you pass your first test. So I actually, when I was going through my process, I failed the financial one the first time I took it. And so I was in a little bit of a time crunch to meet that deadline, but I was able to do it. And then you work for a CPA, under a CPA for a year. And if you want a special license, which is for auditing, like if you want to be an auditor for the rest of your life and you want to be a partner, there's a different CPA license you have to get. And that requires you to have 500 hours of planning and conducting financial statement audits that you have to get signed off before you can get that license. I don't have that license. I knew that that's not something I wanted to do, so I just did the general one. But yeah, and then the last one, which is relatively new in the last couple of years, is you have to have an ethics course, accounting ethics course that you have to take. And yeah, that's, as we'll get into, I'm sure, ethics in accounting is very important. So. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like quite a long, like rigorous process. But for like people who are interested in becoming a CPA, what would you say are some of the most important skills that a CPA should possess?
Yeah, the biggest one that I can see is problem solving. The way that I kind of view accounting and how I kind of explain it is it's just a big puzzle. There's these things that we call like debits and credits, and your debits always have to equal your credits. So it's a puzzle. You just have to figure out where the pieces are and where they're supposed to go. And then like the math always has to work out. The first thing that you learn in accounting class is that your assets equal your liabilities plus your equity. And you make sure that works, and that it's just a big part of the same puzzle. The next piece in the modern age, knowing how to work with Excel and how to quickly navigate through Excel. I use Excel 24/7. Basically, everything that comes to me is in Excel. Everything that goes out is in Excel. So Excel skills really good. Strong ethics and understanding what you should do in certain situations. In accounting, I'm sure if anyone has heard of the Enron, there's a long history of bad ethics in accounting and auditing. And there's a lot that you can do, and you have to make sure that you're doing it with the right mindset and what is best for from an ethical standpoint, not necessarily what is best for the company. And then the last one, which is one that took me a very long time to get used to, is materiality, which means that in my life, if I was like looking at my checkbook and I was off by $1,000, that's a very big problem. At work and in auditing, if something's off by $1,000, sometimes it's not worth the time to investigate it. I know in our auditing days, we have a threshold which is it's called de minimis, which means that if anything is below this number, it's too small for us to care about it. And that number was $250,000. And so that took me a long time to get used to. Some things are just not worth the time to investigate depending on what you're working on. Yeah.
And how would you describe the relationship between a CPA and their clients?
It's a very interesting one. So I started my career at PwC as an auditor and did that for 2.5 years. And CPAs by design, when you're an auditor, you have to be independent from the company you're auditing. And this concept of independence is basically like, you don't report to them, you don't owe them anything. You're going to just tell the truth, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to tell the SEC or the shareholders what the truth is, no matter what. Where that gets a little bit tricky is your client is the one who's paying you. So you have to be independent, but they're the one who's writing you the check. And so it can get very interesting at times. You want to build a relationship so you can ask the hard questions and get honest answers, but you also can't get close enough where it's going to hinder your decision making when it comes to that client. So it's a little bit of a tightrope walk. There are some standards that are in place that kind of help to alleviate that stress, like partners on engagements. How audits work is there's a partner who's in charge, and then there's a bunch of staff below. And it's the partner who ultimately gives the yes or no on if it's a good or bad financial statement. That partner can only be on a certain client for a certain amount of time before they have to roll off. And those kind of standards are in place to make sure that independence is kept. But yeah, it's hard. And even from my perspective now, I'm in what we call the industry. So I'm actually working for a public company, getting audited. My relationship with my auditors is different now. Like I talk to them, I want to build a relationship. I want them to feel comfortable asking me questions, but also their job is to make sure I'm doing my job right, which sometimes doesn't, like, it's not fun having someone looking over your shoulder.
So specifically, can you provide an example of a time when you identified a problem with the client's financial records or your current companies and resolved it? And was the outcome positive?
Yeah, there's one in one of the companies that I worked for where there's a common thing in the accounting world, or at least the finance world that I have seen, is if you ask the question, why do we do this process the way that we do it? A lot of the times the answer you'll get is because it's how we've always done it. which is not a great answer. You should know the reason behind it. And so in one of my jobs, I asked that question. That company valued their inventory using the average method. So every time we get new inventory in, we recalculate the average costing for that inventory, and then that would be the inventory value moving forward. There were components of that were manual to do that calculation. The company went through a business transformation process where they identified that was a very time-consuming process. Because there was manual inputs, there was a higher risk of an error being caused. So they wanted to automate the whole thing, so no one could touch it and no one could mess it up. So they went through the process and automated it. But there's also this concept in the finance world where we have internal controls over processes to make sure that we catch material misstatements before they hit the financial statements. And one of these internal controls that we had looked at every 3 months, we would look at that valuation process, the average costing, and verify that it was correct. Well, I came into this position, I asked the question, why do we do this process this way? And was given the answer, because we've always done it that way. The issue was we updated how the costing in the system was calculated, but we never updated the control that tested that costing. And what resulted was we spent hundreds of hours doing work, testing a process that there was no real way for it to be wrong because we had tested the inputs and we had automated the whole thing. So had to go through a long process in the public world. Big changes like that take a very long time. You have to get a lot of people to sign off. So I wrote the proposal, kind of wrote out why I think it was not beneficial to the company and why it was not in line with our current financial reporting. Got that signed off by the accounting leadership, by the finance leadership, by internal audit, and then finally by our auditors, KPMG, and then ultimately updated the process. And that update saved the company almost 100 hours a year, which now we can use to better look at more critical issues in the accounting function. So,
What industries do you have experience working for as a CPA? Like what firms did you work with while at PwC or as an independent auditor?
Yeah, my experience is kind of all over the place, which I kind of like. At PwC, my main industry was geothermal energy, which is basically making energy from hot water that is near the Earth's core. And I did a couple other power energy related companies as well. My kind of secondary industry was higher education. So I was on the team that audited the University of California system of schools. So all 10 schools. I would participate in that audit every year. And then I also participated in the audit of Stanford. And then once I left PwC, I worked for Decker's Outdoor Corporation, which is based in Goleta, which is a shoe company that owns like UGG and Hoka and Caldeira, a bunch of brands. And I entered that job without having inventory experience or any retail experience. So I had to learn pretty quickly on the fly when I got this job. But that's another thing with accounting that I really like is even if you don't have the experience, a lot of the concepts are similar. And if you get how accounting works fundamentally, you can basically pick up anything. So yeah.
And as an accountant, since you're meeting with different departments and gathering information for filing or reporting, what would you say are the most important aspects of building strong relationships between different departments? as an accounting manager at Deckers?
Yeah, the biggest one is, and know it sounds like easy, but it's communication. Talking to people and making sure that everyone has the same information is critical. There's kind of a joke in the accounting world that we don't get to make the decisions, but we're impacted by every decision. And so it can be an uphill battle at times to try to get your foot in the door to where those decisions are being made. Because accounting is its own beast. Sometimes accounting doesn't make sense. So if someone who's in the decision room does not understand the accounting impact, they might be making a decision that is worse for the business. If they have someone from the accounting background there who can kind of explain it, that can help the conversation. So a lot of my job right now is meeting with people, talking with them, making sure they understand the accounting concepts, making sure that I get all the information I need to do my job for upcoming transactions. And that is very critical to the success of the department. Another thing like that is relatively new is my job is now 100% remote. So I used to go to the office in Goleta every day. And it was very easy. I could go, if I needed to go talk to someone in a different department, I could walk over to their desk and go talk to them. Now it's different. And we also don't have that like coffee talk time either. Sometimes you walk to go get coffee or go get lunch and you run into people, you'd have conversations, build relationships that way. That is all gone now. And it's something that I think the whole world is trying to deal with right now is how do you do your job remotely? How do you build those relationships while you're all at home? And so I have found that just having like even happy hours or like meetings, breaks, like you can eat lunch with people on Zoom. And it might sound weird, but it helps. And then if there is opportunities to see people in person, take those opportunities and go to it, because it's all about building relationships and building your network.
I know you talked about it a little bit earlier about you using Excel a lot, but we wanted to know what accounting software you're most familiar with using. Would it be Excel or?
So it's called an ERP, is our like accounting software. It's Oracle. It's one of the more popular ones. The two big ones are Oracle and SAP. And we use Oracle. It's a bit of an archaic system. If I were to show you what Oracle looks like, it looks like it's from the 90s. And it's something that I have shared with Oracle myself and said, you need to upgrade this because it looks terrible, but it works. And I do have some QuickBooks experience. And then, yeah, Excel is very critical. There's a lot of automation in the accounting world right now. Because the timelines for our reporting are getting shorter. And so we have to figure out how to do things more effectively. So there's a lot of companies and things that we utilize to help us automate things, which like one is Blackline. That helps us check to make sure our general ledger matches to our sub ledgers, so we don't have to ourselves. So there's a lot of cool technology out there for accountants.
So we also talked a bit about ethics earlier, but since it's really important to the accounting profession, can you give us some examples of when you encountered ethical issues and how you reacted to them?
Yeah. One of the ones that I think is the most prevalent that I have spent the most time on thinking of is how we account for reserves. And in the accounting world, we basically have to make an educated guess on certain things. And one of those, as an example, for our retail companies such as Deckers, how much inventory are we going to get returned to us from our customers? That can be a very, very difficult thing to guess. And we try to get all the data we can, and we try to do what we call look back analysis which is basically what did we guess what it was last quarter versus what actually came in and how close were we. And we have a lot of tools that we can use to try to hone in on what it is. But at the end of the day, it's just a guess. And there can be temptations that if like our sales are too high and we want to reduce those, a way you can do that is by saying that more of that's going to get returned to you. And that's where it can get tricky, is trying to parse out what actually is you think is going to happen and trying to separate your business brain from what you want the investors to see. And I'm not saying that that's like a routine thing, but I know when I'm now in charge of reviewing all of those reserves, or most of those reserves, I go in there with the mindset of, do we have support that makes sense for what we're saying? And if we don't, I have no problem. There have been times where like my boss or the CFO would send me something and I would be like, I'm not comfortable with that. Can you help me get comfortable with that? Can you help explain that to me, why we need to do that? And I will say 100% of the time after I have those conversations, I do get comfortable with it and we end up booking that. But it's something that I think is the most important to view with that ethical standpoint, because it is just a guess. And there are a lot of ways that you could theoretically manipulate it if you want to. And I know in the past, companies have been burned for using reserves and such things in a negative way just to make their financial statements look better. So
I think that really shows your emphasis on communication too, just like asking if you have any questions. So we know that you're on the school board, and it was great talking about your career, and thank you so much for sharing about that. But we'd also like to hear like if you have any goals as a school board member, maybe like why you got into it, and just anything you'd like to add about that before we close out.
yeah, being on the school board has been kind of simmering in the back of my mind for a while. One of the things that sometimes doesn't always sit well with me is I work for a company whose sole purpose is to make people more money. And that's not really my heart, right? My standpoint, what I want to do in life is I want to make the world a better place. And yes, Deckers does do charitable work. They do a lot of great things, but if at the end of the day, they're there to make people more money. And so I have tried in my personal life to try and find avenues where I could use the knowledge that I spent so much time learning to make the world a better place. And one of those things is being on the school board. And when I entered or got onto the school board or got appointed, there was 4 former educators on that school board. They had no one who had really financial experience. And as much as we don't think about it, running a school district is a business, and there is a lot of money. There's like $125 million that the schools get to spend every year. And having someone come in who knows like how that works and how to account for such things and what would be most beneficial cost saving wise is very helpful to have that mindset. So that's something that I wanted to bring, and I felt that I could help the district that way. Another thing is I graduated from the school district. My dad was in the military, so we moved here when I was 13, and so I went to VMS and then graduated from Cabrillo. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for those teachers and those staff members who set me on my course. And a lot of those people I still talk to today. And so being able to come back and bring a new voice to that school board. Another thing that people don't talk about a lot, I'm the youngest school board member. Everyone else is a retired teacher. So the age gap between us is quite big. And so I can bring that financial background in, but I can also bring in the background of I'm a young individual living in this world, and I can relate better to what is happening. and make sure that the students and the staff get the care and the support that they need in order to be successful in all that they do. So that's what I want to do. That's my whole goal with being on the school board, and I'm really excited that I'll be on it for another 4 years.
That sounds so great. Thank you so much for putting yourself back into the community. It means a lot for us students and the staff too. So now that was all the questions. So we'd just like to thank you for your time, and it was great talking to you. And this is going to be a great, useful resource for our county students.